Hello, my name is Lakin and welcome to my channel. It is May 1st. I don't know what this is. It's May 1st, and so that means, no, it's June 1st. We just finished May. Wow, okay, off to a great start. We just finished May, and that's what we're doing today, is a May reading wrap-up. In the month of May, we had the Asian Readathon, and I also did my 1960s Readathon, so we have a lot of books from those that I'll be talking about. So for the month of May, I read 21 books. Oh my goodness. During this month, I reached my Goodreads goal of reading 50 books, and it's only May. So I bumped it up to 100, and if I read 21 books in June and read 21 books in July, I will beat that 100 book reading goal. Oh my goodness. We're just gonna see how many books I can read this year and blow last year's reading goal out of the water. I think it has a lot to do with having a booktube channel and getting more involved in the bookish community. I'm loving it. So I read 21 books this month. 12 of those were audiobooks. So I would not be reading a lot if it wasn't for audiobooks. Maybe I'll do a month where I just read only physical books and see how many books I can actually read. It'd probably be like 5 because I read only 5 physical books. And I read 2 ebooks, and I DNF'd 2 books this month. So for my star ratings, I rated 3 books, 2 stars. I rated 8 books, 3 stars. I rated 5 books, 4 stars. And I rated 3 books, 5 stars. And I'll be honest, I did not read my first 5-star book until the 3rd week of this month. And I really thought I was just going to be reading 3-star books this whole month. Whew, I was so worried. But I got 3, so thank you. Let's work from the worst books to the best books. And we'll start with the 2 books I DNF'd. So the first book I DNF'd was Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. I tried to read this for my 1960s readathon. Goodness, I had no clue what was going on. Not a clue. If I had actually been forced to read that in school, I would have hated it. And the next book I DNF'd was The Descendant of the Crane by Joan He. I'm probably pronouncing that really wrong, and I apologize. I DNF'd this because I just couldn't get into it. I don't think I was in the right headspace to be reading that book. So maybe I'll pick it up some other time and try again, but right now it wasn't working for me. The books I rated 2 stars was Ragdian and Andy. I read this one for reading my mom's favorite childhood books. I gave it 2 stars. It was definitely, it needs to just stay in the 70s. That did not age well. The next 2-star book I read was The Road to Woodstock by Michael Lang. He is the person who put together Woodstock. It was basically a written out documentary. I would have just preferred to have watched the documentary instead of listening to 8 hours of numbers and like how much they spent on each band and all these other little things. It was cool, and I enjoyed getting to know more about Woodstock. I have nothing against it. It was just would have rather watched the movie. The next 2-star book was one of my most disappointing books of this month, and that was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Now, trigger warning in this book for sexual assault. Ugh, I was doing so well. Last month, I didn't read any books with this trigger, and that was great. And this month, this was the last book I read this month, and I almost had 2 beautiful months without reading about this. And the one book I don't check because a friend recommended it to me. Well, thought they were a friend. It has it in there. So there was that. It was an attempt. Nothing went through, but still. No thank you. Did it need to be in the book at all? No, not in the detail that it was described in. And also, the sexual scenes were awkwardly described in this whole book. There's a scene whenever our main character is 14 and she is trying to hook up with a 18 or 19-year-old, and it's describing things. Thankfully, the older guy stops it, saying, no, this is wrong, because it is. Still, that was weird. No thank you. And just like the whole mystery aspect and the whole who murdered this guy plotline, I was not invested in that at all. I would have much preferred to have just read about Kaya's life growing up in the marshes alone. Growing up, you know? We don't need this whole extra plot that takes up half the book. This book was very disappointing, and I was angry by the end of it because I was like, why didn't I DNF this? So now on to the 3-star reads. The first 3-star read I'm going to be talking about is Lumberjanes Volume 5 by Noelle Stevenson. I've loved all the Lumberjanes up to this point. I was expecting so much from this because there are mermaids on the cover. I love mermaids. Mermaid stories are the best stories. I was just really let down. Compared to the other ones, did not hold up. And then I also read another graphic novel that's a 3-star, and that was Crowded, Volume 1 by Christopher Selba. This book was interesting. Premise of it is there is now all these different apps like Uber and Lyft. You can rent out a dress, you can rent out your home, you can rent out anything and everything, and it's all a bunch of like little TaskRabbit jobs. And there is one app where you can crowdfund to have a person murdered. So our main character has $1 million behind her so that people will try to murder her and kill her. And so she gets a bodyguard who is trying to protect her. And that's the whole story. Because of that premise, I was expecting a lot more, but our main character, the person who is being hunted, she was annoying. She did not care. She did not listen to the person that she was paying to defend her, and then would get mad when she wasn't defended, when someone would try to kill her because she ran away. I'm not going to be continuing this graphic novel series. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't for me. I was wanting more from it, and it just kind of fell a little flat in my opinion. Sorry, I got a phone call, and when you use your phone to film, it kind of disrupts things. So, where were we? The next book that I rated 3 stars is Dragon Pearl by Yoon Han Lee. I just wanted more from this book. I thought it was a great book. It's a middle grade sci-fi that uses Korean mythology. Oh my goodness. I loved the idea of gumihos and dragons, dokebi. I loved the idea of them and that magical element in a sci-fi world, like up in space. That was so cool, and I enjoyed that aspect of it so much. The only reason it's 3 stars is because parts of it didn't seem realistic. And now, yes, I know, it's fantasy and sci-fi. It's not really meant to be realistic, but when you have a 13-year-old main character who is a gumiho and has never really used her fox powers to do anything because they're meant to be a secret and they have to be in hiding. So if you're not using these powers, how can you be able to control and do all these things and talk about how your power is so strong and stronger than all these foxes who do use their power? That doesn't make sense. Even if, like, at the end of the book, she has this amazing power and is able to wield her charm and her magic, I would have liked to have seen at the beginning when she's first trying to find her brother and stuff like that. I would have loved to have seen her maybe fail, or she does something, but it doesn't work out how she planned it to. And just a little bit more of a learning curve for her. That was a little bit of a letdown. And the end, because I enjoyed it so much, I would have loved to have seen even more. The next 3-star book is the first book in the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series by Jenny Han. I've been wanting to read this book since before the movie came out. The first movie. It's one of those books that I just kept putting off, even though I wanted to watch it, read it, and I love the movies. Whenever I watched the first one, I loved it so much and thought Peter Kravinsky was so precious. I thought Laura Jean was adorable, and just their whole story, like, I loved it. Thought it was a great teenage romance movie with the hype from the movie and loving that, and then the hype from just people talking and screaming about how great this book series is. I was expecting a lot, and I did not get that. Maybe if I had read this beforehand, I would have enjoyed it more. My expectations were not met. Peter Kravinsky in this book, no thank you. Like, Laura Jean can do so much better. Margot in the book, so judgmental and thinking she's right and she knows best. No. Maybe that's why she wasn't around much in the movie. All the characters from the movie, but like lessened and dulled and kind of more jaded. It wasn't as cute. Maybe if you've read the rest of the series, let me know, and if you think that it would be worth my time reading the next 2 books. The next 3-star, I don't have much to say on this, but I did make a video of reading this book, Vengeance Road by Erin Bowman. I said all that I wanted to say in that video. I have nothing really to say. It was a fine book. If you're into Westerns, pick it up. If you're not, don't pick it up. If you are a stickler about English and language, do not pick this up. The whole book is just wrong English. Not just whenever she speaks, but also the narration speaks like a very southern Western person. And I'm used to that from growing up and living where I do. I know a lot of people, like my husband, I read like a paragraph to him and he could not do it. The next book on that I rated 3 stars was Supernova by Marissa Meyer. This is the last book in the Renegades trilogy. I really enjoyed the first 2. As an ending to those 2, it kind of got cliche and it kind of went away from the whole message that I thought the first 2 books were portraying. The morally gray area basically vanished in this book, and it was basically good versus evil, even though I thought the whole series was talking about that gray area and what's really right and how it's kind of hard to draw that strong line. It let me down. That's all I'm gonna say. The next book was Joni by Joni Eareckson. This is a memoir. I read it in my mom's childhood favorite books. This is a memoir about a woman who is a quadriplegic. And basically it's her story of her coming to terms with that and embracing and seeing the brighter side of what life has given her. And she is an amazing artist and a speaker and stuff like that. It's really hard to rate memoirs because basically, like, you're saying, oh, I don't really care how your life ended up, or your life story isn't that interesting, or whatever. Like, it's weird. I didn't love this book. Like, I'm not gonna be coming away from this book changed or with a new perspective on life, but it's also, I'm so glad that she has been able to turn her life into something that she is proud of. The next book I read, that was 3 stars. It's a book I never thought I would read, and the only reason I read it is because it was on my mom's favorites list. I read Old Yeller by Fred Gibson. I've avoided that movie. I've avoided reading the book. Like, I've avoided everything about Old Yeller because I know what happens at the end. The dog dies. That's not a spoiler. 1, because the book is so old, but also 2, even if you were to read the book, on the very first page, it talks about him dying at the end. So, not a spoiler. I give Old Yeller, the dog, 5 stars. Such a good boy. Oh my goodness. One of the best dogs. I give the people 2 stars. So to even it out, 3 stars. It was fine. It was short. I just don't get the appeal of the book. Now we're on to the 4-star books, and we're starting this off with Sea Sirens by Amy Chu. This was a graphic novel about mermaids and about a girl who is a surfer who goes to visit these mermaids. Oh my goodness. 1, the art, beautiful. 2, the story was just so adorable. The only reason it's not a 5-star is just because it's really hard for me to rate a graphic novel 5 stars. Even though this one was cute and adorable and I would highly recommend it, even if you're not like super into mermaids, just for like the art. Oh my goodness. I don't think it's gonna stick with me in the long run, you know? So, not a bad book. Definitely go pick it up. I could stare at that art all day. And that's one of the main reasons I love graphic novels, is for the art. The next 4-star book was one of my mom's childhood favorites, so I did like one of them. And that was Wrinkle in Time by Madeline Engel. This book surprised me. My mom has been trying to get me to read it for a while. She always says, ooh, read this, read this, read this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, one day. Not really thinking much of it. And I was worried I wouldn't enjoy it as much because I'm an adult. And all the people that I hear that loved it when they were a kid. And I hadn't heard many people who loved it like now that didn't love it as a kid then. You know what I mean? I had some issues with the characters and stuff like that, but Charles Wallace is my favorite. If you don't know what this book is about, it's basically this group of 3 kids. Charles Wallace, Meg, and Colin? I don't think that's his name. I don't know what his name is. They all go basically they fly through wrinkles and space and all this stuff to find their dad and bring him home. This book says the name Charles Wallace like every other sentence. Whenever I see this book, all I can think of is Charles Wallace. I will be continuing this series, and I will be reading it in June for my 1970s readathon. So, yeah. I'm excited. The next 4-star book was Would Like to Meet by Rachel Winters. This book had so many rom-com feels that it was precious. Precious. We follow our main character. Can't remember her name. Maybe I didn't like it as much as I thought. I'm terrible with names of characters. But our main character, she is an assistant for people who write scripts for movies, stuff like that. And she has made a bet or a deal with this snotty, like, thinks he's better than everyone writer to get him to write romance. And she basically said, trying to prove that meet cutes happen in real life and aren't just like this rom-com made up thing. She tries to set up all these meet cutes in her real life, and basically it's just a rom-com romance. I know that's a really bad explanation, but it's really cute. It has lots of references to rom-coms. I could totally see this as a rom-com movie. If you're into that light, don't really think too much, but just cute, fluffy read, pick this up. The next book that was 4 stars was A Caribbean Mystery by Agatha Christie. I read this for my 1960s readathon, so you can get more of my thoughts there. I have been trying to enjoy Agatha Christie, and this is the first one that I actually really enjoyed from her. It is about a old lady who goes on this Caribbean vacation. There's a murder, and there's talk of another murderer, like a serial killer basically on the island. And this old man gets murdered because he talks about said serial killer, and there is a trigger warning for suicide. Now, I will preface this by saying no one actually attempts suicide, but there is talk about it because that is what the serial killer uses. He uses the guise of suicide to kill his victims. So, no one suspects that it was foul play. And there is also on Hulu all the Miss Marple movies, and there was a Caribbean mystery movie, and I watched that, and it just made me love it so much more. It's a mystery, you know, the beginning is great, the end's great, the middle's kind of slow, but you know, it's a typical mystery. The next book on this 4-star list is They Come in All Colors by Malcolm Hanson. I read this one also for my 1960s readathon. In this book, we follow a biracial boy during 2 different times in his life. One when he is, I think, 14, living in New York, and one when he is 8, living in Georgia. And the whole book is basically him experiencing and realizing and coming to terms with what racism is as a whole. Whenever he was 8, something horrible happens in his town, and he thinks it's one way, but then as he's older, he realizes that it was something else. And just trying to come to terms with that and understand why it happens and why people like him are treated differently. I've really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed the conversation around this book. I said it in the 1960s readathon, I'm pretty sure, how this book is set in the 60s, but it felt like it could be now, and especially in what is going on in our nation and how our nation is grieving and mourning the loss of so many people that should still be with us. And we should not know their names as hashtags as someone who doesn't have to deal with that every day. I have the ability to turn off all social media, to block all the horrible things that are happening out in the world because they don't affect me. But me doing that is not going to help anything. It's not going to change anything. Even though I will never fully understand what happens, and I can only read about it in books and hear about it from other people, that doesn't change the fact that I feel for this type of thing. At the very top of the description, I'm going to have a couple links to places that have a bunch of lists of different references and resources, because I'm not the expert on this. I'm still learning and still growing, and it's not my place to speak over the voices who know about this best. I'll leave those down in the description. If you can donate, donate. If you can't, use those articles, those movies, those books down in the description. Join the Blackout Buddy Read that is happening from June 5th to June 19th, and I'll leave the video for that as well. I will warn you about this book. There is a lot of language. This 8-year-old boy has such a potty mouth. Oh my goodness. Because our narrator is confused in the beginning of the book, we're confused, or at least I was. As you read the story, it becomes more clear and stuff like that. So yeah, read this book. It only has like 100 and something reviews, and it came out last year, so check it out. Those are all the 4-star reads. 5-star reads. We got 3 of them. I'll try not to talk your head off. I'm sorry. It's just, you know, when I start talking about books, kind of hard not to talk about books. The first 5-star book I read this month. So glad I read it. Oh my goodness. I read this for my 1960s readathon as well, and that is Before We Were Free by Julia Alvarez. We follow a main character who is 12. We're following her in, I'm pretty sure, the Dominican Republic during the dictatorship. This is basically her living through dictatorship and trying to become free, and the actions and consequences of her family helping take down the dictator. Beautifully written. It's her basically coming of age story during all this, and her really learning and realizing what she thought was good is not, and what it means to actually fight for what you believe in and the sacrifices that are made, but yet also not turning bitter and hateful. Even though our main character is young, the story is written in a way that we fully understand as a reader what is going on, even though she does not. And I appreciated that. And it was interesting to see this life that I will never have to experience as someone who lives in a country that has democracy. It was like talking to a friend. It wasn't all dark. We talked about her crushes and the boys she liked and her becoming a woman and all this other stuff, while the other stuff is mixed into it. And it was just, I just loved it so much. That is one of the books that I would have never picked up if it wasn't for the 1960s readathon, and that's what those readathons are about, is me finding books from those time periods or about those time periods and picking up books that I would not normally know about and finding new favorites. The next 5-star book that I read was The Astonishing Color of Actor by Emily X.R. Pan. This book I read for the Paper Vacations book club that was started by Susan Reed's, Cozy Becks, and Books and Violet. They are all three the creators of the Paper Vacations book club, and that was their pick. And I was hesitant to read this book because it deals with suicide and mental health in general. And as someone who suffers with mental health and suffers with that dark stuff, I was hesitant because I didn't want it to be this whimsical adventure and not written correctly. But boy, was I wrong. This book is not a whimsical adventure. It's about a journey through dealing with grief and the grief of someone who has taken their own life. Dealing with the fact that you could not save them and that they died thinking they were alone. This hit really close to home for me because my uncle lost his life to suicide. The wording in this book, throughout this whole book, is beautiful and explains things that I feel but could not express through words. This book took me all month to read because I kept putting it down and crying and just trying to process my own emotions and thoughts. The other aspects, not as much. I feel like the main point of this book is the mental health aspect, so that's why I still gave it 5 stars. There is a romance in this book. That romance did not need to be there. Such a waste. Especially because, at the end, it kind of felt like there's this romance. And so, once someone loves you, once you have someone, a significant other, then all the pain goes away. And, that's all you need to fix everything. And that's not how it works. And so I didn't enjoy that aspect. I didn't enjoy how hateful and hostile our main character was, Lee. Another character named Fang. She was just very rude, unnecessary woman-on-woman hate. For what this book did to me and what this book means to me now, I can look past those things. The last book I read was The Help.
Editing Lincoln here, popping in because this last book, The Help, by Catherine Stockett, I initially gave it 5 stars. And I said in my original review how I had found out that a white woman wrote this book, and I kind of felt uneasy about reading a book about the struggles of Black women during that time when she didn't even experience that. And so I felt a little uneasy, but because I had enjoyed the movie so much and I had enjoyed the book, I was allowing myself to I felt like I was overreacting. But now that I have seen some other things going around about how that book actually came to be written and different stuff like that, it feels really gross to have 5 stars on that book. I can't separate the work of art from the artist, so I dropped it down to 1 star. I can enjoy it for what it is, but I don't want to be someone that someone reads my review or just sees the 5 stars and thinks this is a book that I fully support, because I don't anymore. Kind of wish I had known before I read it, Yeah. The Help was my 3rd 5-star read of May, but it is now my first 1-star read of the year.
And that's where we're ending it off on. Ooh, yikes. Those are all the books I read. I feel like this book is forever long, and I apologize for that. Thank you for sticking around with me. All the important things, all the videos I've mentioned, all of the different places to donate and to find resources, and the Black Girl Buddy Read, and the description is going to be full of goodies for you to explore. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye! It was basically just a written out documentary? Documentary.